ado, let's talk about purchasing and receiving. Looking at the folks who are dialed in here, again, it appears to me I've worked with almost all of you in the past, and I feel like all of you on some level are already using purchasing in Counterpoint, but just so that I'm not making any assumptions, when we talk about purchasing in Counterpoint, and by the way, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. If you cannot see my screen, please, type into the chat right now, get our attention. When we talk about purchasing in Counterpoint, we're going to the main menu, we're going purchasing, and we know there's these three levels of purchase requests, purchase orders, receiving. I've got a beautiful document here to highlight this. Everybody knows you start off in Counterpoint with a document called a purchase request, and that essentially, it's about as serious as a shopping list if you are heading towards the store, right? You're going to go shop on Saturday morning, and purchase request is about as serious as you get out a notepad or a post-it note and you start writing down what you think you want. The great thing about purchase requests is you can do just about anything to a purchase request. You can add items, you can subtract items, you can change costs, you can completely delete the whole thing if you want. And nobody else in Counterpoint really sees that you're working on a purchase request. It doesn't show up in other views, or no one sees something that says, quantity on purchase requests. There's no such field. So really, purchase requests are very, very light and happy. As you probably know, when you get serious about a purchase request, we do a step called post, and that purchase request becomes a purchase order. Purchase orders are a little more serious in Counterpoint, and by serious, I simply mean you can't willy-nilly just go in and change a bunch of quantities or delete items or add items. Once you've got to the point of having a purchase order, Counterpoint considers that probably somewhere there's a vendor filling this for you. We can still change a purchase order, but Counterpoint will have us go through a step called reissue. And when they say reissue, all they mean is we push it back in the chain, we push it back to being a purchase request, and as a purchase request, you can do anything you want. So it's a wild, wild west again, and make whatever changes you want, post it, goes back to being a PO, and you go on your way. The end goal, of course, what we really hope to get to at some point is the stuff shows up on your dock, and we do a step in Counterpoint called receiving, and that's where we really enter, here's what actually showed up, here's our actual quantities, here's our actual costs, etc. Okay? So I'm hoping that everybody here, when I talk about kind of high level, this is what we're all about, I'm hoping at this point everybody's nodding along and saying, yep, Tom, we got it. There's purchasing, and it goes through this flow in Counterpoint. If you agree, just type yes in the chat. This is going to be more interactive than I normally am. Any yeses? I'm watching. There's a yes. Thank you, Jess. All right. Thank you, Ashley. All right. I won't belabor this. Thank you, Connie. I won't belabor this too much. All right. Let's get on to it. So now, here we are in purchasing. So we go over to purchasing. Now, just for a moment, I'm going to go to purchase requests. I'm going to show you, you all know, I believe, how to manually go create a purchase request. I'm going to do this for, if anybody doesn't know this, but you can go to purchase request. And this is where you could manually build a purchase request. I've got a batch here, so I'll go into my batch. And for building a purchase request, you start with auto assign. I'm going to pick a vendor here. I've got a vendor called Pinnacle. I'm using a golf database today. We have a wide variety of different customers. There was not one vertical I could pick today, so I'm going with my golf company, as good as any. And we go to our lines. And I bet everybody here knows how to get here, and you're probably used to clicking this magnifying glass. And you go look up, this happens to be golf balls. And so I could go look up some particular golf balls, maybe the Dunlop distance model here. And I might say however many I want. And I could go along here, I could pick. Most of you are probably used to that. Here's the first tidbit that I'm going to throw out today. Did you know there's a button down here called Add Items that a whole bunch of people ignore? And it's not, I guess the naming makes me kind of shy away from ever using it, but add items, you're not actually creating new items. This is if I want to add additional items to my purchase request. And so check this out. I can click this. It will ask me if I want to save my current changes. Yes, I do. And what this will do is it pulls up this pop-up. And on the pop-up, as soon as it pops up here, it's going to give me some options about what items that I want to look at here. I don't know why this is being quite so slow. I was testing it earlier today. It wasn't nearly like that. But anyway, so I pop into this. Now, it comes in with two tabs, and this is something to get used to. But when you come in, first tab is set filter. And you'll notice the default filter is items for primary vendors. And that sounds like a good filter. Usually if I'm adding items, I want the items that apply to this vendor. Sounds like a good idea. I could do some other filtering here. I could just go after a category, but honestly, it's just this primary vendor that I like the most that is helping me. All right. So we will go to the next tab that says select items. And this is the part, it's going to give me a scary message that says, hey, you're going into this, you didn't really filter very much. This could be a lot of items. I'm not worried a bit. I'll say yes. And I could even turn off that message for the future. I left it on just so you could see it. But this is not a big scary thing. What I like about this is now Counterpoint is going to filter to just my vendor's items, right? So in this case, I was doing a vendor called Pinnacle. Pinnacle's items are these items. And now I can go through and I can just pick and choose, okay? I don't know. I wish we were doing this with all our mics on because I was hoping at least I'd hear one person say, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know you could do that. What I love about this is you can kind of pick and choose, click, 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 click. Once you see what you got there, you can say add lines and close, and it will just sweep those onto your purchase request. Now, I haven't made any choices yet in regards to quantities, but no big deal. At least now I've got everything in front of me, and now I can highlight individual lines. And I can go in here and decide what I want to order. And I can go down this list and pick and choose, right? So that is, it's not necessarily under the category of purchase advice yet, but in terms of purchasing skills, it's just a nice little trick to have in your toolbox for creating purchase requests. So just something to streamline your steps. Now, let's get on to the real focus of today. That's just general purchasing where you manually create it. I'm not going to save these changes. We're going to come back and do this a different way. But now we're going to get on to the real focus of today, which is a tool in Counterpoint called Purchase Advice. And the purpose of Purchase Advice is to streamline and assist you with your purchasing choices. Now, I'm going to take just a moment and talk about purchasing at a high level. You know that you have a system called Counterpoint that keeps track of your items, and you have things like quantity on hands. So you have a system that knows your quantities that you've got. It also keeps track of what you're selling, right? So if you take those two pieces of information, you would think that any system worth its weight should be able to give you some suggestions, right? If I know what you're selling or how quickly you're selling it, and if I know what you have on hand, that should give me some possibilities to recommend to you what you need, all right? So we should be geared up here. And the tool that Counterpoint uses to do that is called Purchase Advice. So that's where I'm going to go next. So we're going to pop in here. And with Purchase Advice, there are a couple of flavors of Purchase Advice. And I'm going to describe to you all of them at a high level, and two of them we will do at a little deeper level, all right? So the three levels of purchase advice, we have one called replenishment, we have one called maximum, and I always call it min-max because that's what it really is. And there's one called days of supply. And days of supply I really want to show you today. Most folks, when I teach on purchase advice, are typically most interested in either min-max or days of supply. I won't go into great detail on replenishment. Replenishment to me is it's the least robust of the choices. It's very, very light and happy, but I always think of it as a kind of a convenience store mentality, or corner gas station mentality. Basically, if I sell something, order it. If I sell 6, order 6. If I sold 3, order 3. It's not that robust. There's ways you can tweak it and play with it, but honestly, the other two tools, in my experience, are more robust and more useful to folks. So I don't really spend a lot of time on this. Maybe you guys, maybe someone here will really go in and play with replenishment and decide you really love it. And you can email me and tell me how you used it. But in my experience, most folks are interested in min-max and days of supply. But again, replenishment is very much that idea of if I sold X amount, order X amount. Okay. Let's talk about min-max. I have a number of customers, and I haven't seen anyone get on the call yet today. If they were here, I would have them give a little testimony. We have a number of customers who really do some good stuff with min-max. One of them is a local store. They have 5 or 6 locations, and they take the time to go into their items and their inventory, and they set up min-maxes by location. And then each week, their buyers run purchase advice based on wherever they fell below their minimums, and Counterpoint will recommend to you what you need to order to get up to your maximum. And they are very good about this, and they live and die off of min-maxes. For that reason, they have a big emphasis with their stores that the quantity on hands in Counterpoint means something. And by the way, I should say with both of these tools I show you today, the min-max and the days of supply, that quantity on hand in Counterpoint, it has to be somewhat accurate, because otherwise we'll be making purchasing decisions off of information that's incorrect, right? If Counterpoint thinks I've got 20 of some gadget and I actually have 2 and it's my best selling item, Counterpoint's got bad information. It won't give me a good suggestion of what to order if that quantity on hand is not accurate. So I just have to preface our whole conversation today with, to really get the maximum value out of this, you have to have some quantities that you trust. So that's enough about that. Let's talk about min-max for a minute here. The idea with min-max is you can come in, and by the way, when we do this today, I might do it for just an individual vendor, especially when you first get into this or playing around with this. You might want to just focus on a vendor or on a category and take your time to kind of dial that in and learn how it all kind of works. The great thing about this tool is at the end of this, we're not going to end up with a report. We're going to end up with a choice here called generate, that we can actually generate that purchase request. And the great thing with a purchase request is you can go in and you make changes, you can edit it, do anything you want. So let's check this out. So here's this one called min-max. Just for starters, I am going to pick on a single vendor just to kind of keep our example smaller in scope. I'll pick on Pinnacle, and we're just going to say, based solely off of our min-max values, what might it recommend to me to purchase? So, and I'm doing this for my main location at this time. So I'll just say preview, and we'll see what kind of hits that this comes up with. So I don't have a lot going on here, and part of this reason why I only got a couple hits is probably because I don't know that I have a ton of min-maxes set up in here, but let's go check this out. So in this example, if you can see this okay, it came back with 2 items. One is the done DDH, that's the distance Pinnacle golf balls. And in this example, here, let me make this slightly bigger, hope we can see that a little better. This report looks a little busy, but it's got some great information, so it's worth taking a moment to see what it's telling us. In this column, it starts off quantity on hand, or quantity on PO. It's telling us some informational things like what's the quantity already on POs, already on purchase requests, quantity on order. And then we have our min-max, and I'll show you in a moment where we set those up, and it shows me a quantity on hand. And Counterpoint is just doing math here and saying, if my minimum is 30, if I fall below that, it's going to recommend me to order. And if it does recommend to me to order, it's going to recommend amount to get up to my totals. And let's go see where this 30 and 60 came from. So this was done DDH. So if I go over inventory items, and I'll pull up this item. Now this is the item. When we talk about setting min-maxes, we actually have to go down to this tab called inventory. You know that you have single item record, but for each item, there could be multiple locations. In my case, I have a few. If you come into this, you might come in single record view. Yours might look like this. If you have this view, just click the little table view and you can look at these in table view. I like table view because it's kind of easier to see. There's multiple locations and it's a really easy place here to set my min maxes. So at this moment, I can see that for the main location, I've set these up. I'm going to put in my other ones here just so they match. And you'll wonder, well, why did he type the max column first, right? Counterpoint can do a funny thing if you put this. I don't know if it's going to do it in table view. Sometimes it'll do that in record view. In record view, sometimes if you put the minimum first, it'll say your minimum cannot be greater than your maximum. So I'm just kind of in a habit of always doing the max first. It looks like in table view, it's not going to fight me, but I have seen that in record view. So this is where you can set these up. The thing that I really like about min-max is if you have items that you carry year in, year out, and you have a rough idea of how much space is available on the shelf or how much space you have to store this stuff, it's a great example of something you can set it up and forget it. Set and forget, and then whether it's once a week or however you do your purchasing schedule, you go in, you run your min-max report for purchase advice, and it just comes up with your suggestions, right? There's no rocket science behind it, right? You've set where you want to be. If you fall below those minimums, Counterpoint's going to recommend what you need to get to your maximums. And again, I have a number of customers who really take advantage of this. Now, one thing I'll say about min-maxes is when I'm working with new customers and we show this, the first thing they say is, I will never have the time to go through and set up all my min-maxes. And that's very understandable, right? There is a tool in more recent versions of Counterpoint that is a min-max suggestion tool where you actually can say, go back and look at some history and give me some suggestions about how to set these. And it's even a tool that will set them for you. I like it from the standpoint that it's an automated thing, but honestly, I always trust what buyers like you guys, your inventory better than a computer in terms of what's selling and where what do you want to have on hand. So it's great there's a tool. I still trust you guys the most when it comes to making these kind of decisions. What are your min-maxes going to be? Now, just because you do this for some items doesn't mean you have to do it for all. I've had some customers who maybe you've got your top 50 items that you never want to run out of stock. You could go in just for 50 items and set up your min-maxes, and you could still come in Tuesday morning, run purchase advice just off of min-max. The only ones you're going to hit are the ones that you set up. And everything else you might handle in a different method. Okay, so and also when you're first getting started, you don't have to do your entire inventory to get your hands wet with this or get your feet wet. You could certainly pick a vendor, pick a category, then go ahead and play with it. Set up some min-maxes, see what kind of recommendations it comes up with. Remember, the end of this tool is it generates a purchase request, and you're going to go in and you're going to edit that. This tool is called Purchase Advice, and I underline the word advice. It's going to give you suggestions, and you guys are going to go in with your knowledge of your business and your knowledge of your products, and you're going to edit those to come up with numbers that in the end make the most sense to you. All right, so this is where you set the min-maxes in that example. I'm going to just pick the next item in line here and see who you are. Done DIS. Let's see if it's set up with any min-maxes. Let's see here. None so far, but I'm just going to pop in a few here. I'm going to kind of match what we just did. Pop these in here quick. I'm purposely picking kind of bigger numbers so I know we'll get some hits today for the report. So this is an item that just a minute ago didn't hit our min-max report, but now I fully expect with a quantity of 4 on hand for Maine, 100% we expect that this done DIS will hit. So let's try that out real quick. I'm going back to purchasing, and we're going to purchase requests and purchase advice. We will do the maximum, that means min-max. And just for now, I'm going to filter for one. By the way, you don't have to filter for an individual vendor. I'm just doing this to kind of keep our report short today. You could, once you get this set up, you could come in, Monday, Tuesday morning, whatever, if you have your min-maxes, you can just run it wide open and it will create separate purchase requests for each of your vendors, because as you know, purchase requests are by vendor. So let's check this out. We should see should get another hit here. And good for us, that's what I was hoping to see. There's our Dunlop distance golf balls, and you can see that those are hitting the report, okay? It fell below, if we have a quantity on 4 is below 30, so that's why it even hit the report. And to get to our goal of 60, it's recommending that we order 56. So good for us. It's always nice when math works, and that's what that looks like. Any questions this second about min-maxes before we go on? Because the next thing I want to talk about is days of supply. Feel free to unmute yourself if that makes it easier to talk, or you can type in the chat window. All right, looks like Ashley is typing a question, so I'll give her. It only does quiet hand, not available, correct? I have to think about that for one moment. Ashley, that is a really good question. I've never been asked that. I've got to stop and think about that. Okay, Ashley, you get the prize. You stumped me, and we're only 30 minutes into the call. I'm making a note. I will test that and find out. The fact that you're asking the question tells me that maybe you've tried this out yourself and found out it doesn't. Is that a true statement? Okay, I don't see Ashley typing back. Ashley, I will check that out.
Maybe it would be easier if I unmute myself.
Hey, there you go. Thank you.
So because we use like layaways and quantity available, we renamed it as quantity in store versus quantity on hand, because quantity on hand will also show what's like on our layaways and stuff. So is there a way to switch that?
I will have to check on that, and that is a fantastic question. I have just never contemplated that, but I totally get it. If this is you've got a bunch of product that's spoken for because it's on a layaway or it's on an order or whatever, you'd want to know that, because that really means it's fallen below, right? It's fallen below what we need if it's spoken for. I will test that, and I will, along with sending out our recording, I will make sure that I answer that question and send it out. That's a great question. A+ for you.
Okay.
A+.
Thank you.
Right,
thank you.
Okay, the rest of you got to up your game. That was a great question. Just kidding. You're all A+. You're all A+. Don't pepper me with questions. What have I done? What have I done? Okay, so that's min-max. Let's talk now about days of supply. Now, what I really like about days of supply, honestly, when I first started at LPA with Counterpoint years ago, we did not have days of supply. And we would teach people about purchase advice and say, well, there's replenishment. It's not that robust. If you sell it, you order more. And people are like, it's not really what we need. And we'd show people min-max and say, hey, that's great. But, honestly, I don't want to. There's a lot of people that don't want to sit down and go through every item and think about min-max values, right? And so days of supply is kind of the happy middle ground where you get the advantage of all the data that's in your system, but you don't have to sit there and come up with min-maxes for all your items. And here's how I would describe how min-max works, all right? I think, honestly, the best way I can show this is I'm going to just open up Notepad here. Just going to get myself a new page, I hope, maybe. And I'm going to create, this is going to be the world's most simplified example. Ready? I just made your lives so much easier. Everybody in your store, have one item. Everybody, you have one item and it's 1001. Okay? And we just got done with, let's say, we'll pretend we're just finishing up September. okay? So for September, let's say we got through the whole month, and let's say we sold 30. I'm gonna round off a little bit. I know September has 31 days, but let's say we sold 30. 30 quantity sold, okay? Now let's say here we are, we're sitting here the last week of September, and we're trying to figure out how much should I purchase so I can get through October, okay? So if I have this item, and I'm cheating here, I'm gonna say, the days in the month. I'm cheating a little bit. I know I'm cheating. I'm saying 30 days, right? So if I sold 30 in the month of September, and I'm rounding off and saying, hey, there's 30 days in September, how many am I selling per day? And you guys, because I know you're smart, you'd say, I'm selling 1 per day, right? Simple math, right? I sold 30 in 30 days. The rate at which I'm selling these is 1 per day, okay? Now, let's say to get through October, and again, I'm going to cheat, October days, I'm going to cheat again and say let's say there's 30 days in October, okay? How many of these would I need to get through the next 30 days? And the answer would be 30, right? If I'm selling 1 per day, 1 per day times 30 days, then I need. Now, I'm purposely making the math so easy. I promise you we'll make it harder in a minute, but let's just start with the basics. Now, here's where we're headed. We figured out what we need. However, let's say I already had some on hand. If I already had 10, then I have a new need. $20, right? So this is the whole basics of days of supply. And I know I used the simplest numbers I could, and I cheated on the days of the month, but I purposely am starting with the simplest numbers because we're going to make it harder as we go, okay? So again, with days of supply, you pick a date range. The date range tells you how fast you are selling something. Now I chose a date range where we're just finishing up. It doesn't have to be the most recent. Especially if it's an item that you use or carry year in, year out, I could look at, maybe we're heading into October right now, I could look at last year's October to give me an idea of what I should be purchasing, right? There's a big assumption with days of supply is this is an item that you ongoing carry, ongoing replenish. If you are doing, let's say, women's clothing, and this is, spring, and you're never going to carry that blouse ever again, days of supply really won't do you much good. But if we're talking a whole bunch of other verticals that we work with, garden centers, liquor stores, meat shops, a whole bunch of people, gift shops, a whole bunch of people we work with that are ordering the same product year in, year out, then days of supply is going to help you, okay? Again, the math here, I chose a date range. In this case, I chose September to find out how quickly am I selling, comes up with sales per day. When I say how far into the future do I purchase, I said 30, and I come up with this math. If I already have 10, what is it going to recommend to me? It should recommend to me 20 to get through the next 30 days. Now I'm going to play with these numbers a little bit, okay? Let's say, I'm going to keep my sales at 1 per day just because it keeps it easy. But let's say my vendors are pretty good about restocking me. I know especially in the liquor vertical, you order stuff and you have it in your store 2 days later, whatever. So you don't necessarily think about ordering 30 or 60 days out. You guys are looking at the next week, the next 2 weeks. So let's say I'm ordering, I know the rate at which I'm selling, I need to get through the next 14 days. So to get through the next 14 days, I would need a quantity of 14. I already have 10. So how many would I need to order? I would need to order 4. And I realize with purchasing, you might order, and vendors only stock things in 6 and 12s and cases of 24 or whatever. So this need of 4, that might get rounded up. By the time we're all done, that might get rounded up to 6 by Counterpoint based on your vendor multiples or your vendor case packs, okay? But that's kind of the idea. I know this is highly simplified, but I want you to kind of understand this a little bit, because the next thing is we're going to go into Counterpoint, and I'll show you the things we're going to click to make this happen. Any questions just on kind of this math and how we're getting to that need quantity? Any questions on this? Okay, if no one's jumping out there, then we're going to go off now and we're going to do this in Counterpoint. Okay. So we went into purchase advice. For the flavor of purchase advice, we chose days of supply. And I can come in here. Again, I'm going to focus just on this one vendor to keep the example simple. You do not have to limit to this vendor. You'll just get multiple purchase requests when you get to that point. Because we're doing days of supply, as soon as I change to this type, there's some fields that popped open here that are now required. Okay, in my system, green is required. The first one that's required is the date range. And you're wondering, why is that required? That's what we're pointing at to say, use this as the marker for how quickly I'm selling something. So I'm going to use this month up in, I'm saying 30 days, whatever. I'll come back to history factor in a second, and we'll say days of supply. Again, I'm using simple numbers. I'm looking at 30 days of September sales, and I'm saying, recommend to me what do I need to get through the next 30. All right, so I'm going to say preview. And we will get this lovely report. I'll make this a little bigger so we can all hopefully see this. All right, so here we go. Now, this first item, done DDH, this showed up on our min-max, but now it's showing up on a report for a different reason. It's showing up on a report, and I'll tell you why. Here's my quantity sold. In my 30 days, I sold 11. Okay? And I'm saying to Counterpoint, recommend to me what I need to get through my next 30. Well, if I'm selling 11 in 30 days, I need 11 to get through the next 30 days. I've got 8 currently on hand. So Counterpoint's doing that math for me. And so that's where the 3 came from. You can ignore our min-maxes. We're not using those right now. This is just strictly based on days of supply. So my selling rate is 11 every 30 days. I want to get through the next 30 days. It's recommending to me what I need here. Same is true for my DIS golf balls. I sold 8 in a month. I currently have 4. It's recommending. Same is true here for these titanium. Sold 7. I've got 4. So that's that. I'm purposely picking the easiest numbers possible. You might be looking at saying, well, this is just stupid dumb. I promise it always gets harder. So, but I like to show it like this so you can kind of see where that's coming from. Now, the history factor. You might be heading into October of this year and you're feeling very optimistic. And you'll say, yeah, September might have been a little slow for us, but things have been picking up. And I might put my history factor at 1.20. That's going to increase any suggestions by 20%. Okay? At the top here, there's some adjust quantities. So I can pay attention to, hey, if this is already on a purchase request, take that into account. If this is already on an open PO, take that into account. You might have, not everybody does this, but you can set up vendor minimums in Counterpoint. So you might say, hey, the vendor minimum is X. I got to hit that minimum. So you can take that into account. And then lastly, we've got vendor multiples. And this, especially in the liquor industry, people are paying attention to this. They're probably going to round or increase to the nearest multiple because I can't buy 5 bottles of Coors Light. It's going to come in a 6-pack, a 12-pack, or a 24, right? So you can bake that right into this so that gets taken care of. I'm leaving it off during our examples because it's easier to kind of see the math when there's not this extra rounding, but those are choices for you. So let's say instead of, I know this is what's sold in 30 days, maybe my suppliers are overseas. I'm going to say, recommend to me what I need to get through the next 60 days, right? That's a bigger range. So if I preview this, I'm getting my same hits, but you can see that adjusted quantity or that quantity needed, that's bumping up. So no longer I just need 11 for 30 days, I need 22 for 60. And again, the math is happening. 22 minus 8 is getting me to my 14. Quantity sold was 8, but my needed must be 16. I already got 4. there's a weird rounding error happening there. I'm not sure what that is. Something's happening on the rounding here, but you get this one makes sense. That's 14 minus 4, you get to that 10.
Question.
Yeah.
It says, what is more important to set up in Counterpoint, mins and maxes or case count?
Ooh. All right, Peggy. Good question. Let me show you where that case quantity comes into play. But I'll just finish this thought here. So this was our preview, and the real power of this is not that just that we got a report, but the real power is the very fact that at this point, I can hit this button called generate. I'm going to do this so you can see this, Peggy. I'm going to come back to your question, but this is the power of this whole tool. It's not just a report. When I'm ready, I can say, go do this. And what's going to happen is it actually went and created that purchase request. So now over in purchase request, enter. If I can pull this up. Sorry, I kind of confused my example. I had an existing purchase request there. I'm sorry about that. But you can see this swept these in. I had an existing one. I'm sorry about that. I should have done the example with none. But the idea is it generates this for you. And I work with someone, some of you heard me say this before, but I work with Dave Hagan. Dave Hagan, long before he worked at LPA, he was a buyer for a medical supply store. He used Counterpoint. He was a Counterpoint user before he worked here, believe it or not. And he'd come in on Tuesday morning and he'll tell you, he'd sit down, he'd open up Counterpoint purchase advice, he'd run it wide open for every single customer, and he'd sit back and drink his coffee and he'd hit generate. And it might generate 45 purchase requests. And then he would come in and he would just review those. And he'd look down the line because he was the buyer, you know, he knew what he was looking for. And in some cases he would agree. In some places he'd say, wow, that's kind of heavy handed. You know, maybe September was a good month and we're not going to do that in October. So maybe he's going to take that 14 and maybe cut that in half, right? He might come across a line here and say, nope, we're not going to do that. So there's a line delete. If you know this, if you like shortcuts, it is control delete. And so you just bop through this. And now the nice thing is you're just editing lines, right? Instead of you having to go search and find everything. And maybe as you're looking at this, it actually gives you a reminder that, oh yeah, it's for this vendor. We were going to purchase a little more anyway. They had a new item I wanted to drop on here, and you can add more items. So this is the real the power of the tool is not just a report. Everybody can get a report out of Counterpoint, but having that generate button that goes and populates this. So back to Peggy's question. In Counterpoint, I'm going to use my done DVH item as an example. So here's where a few minutes ago we set up these min-maxes. And min-maxes are great if you're planning to use those. One thing about min-max, you can really dial it in, right? Let's say you're a liquor store or a gift shop, you can really dial in what you want to have on your shelf. And you can, you really can fine tune this. And you might change it during the course of the year, but you really can dial that in. That's the nice thing about that. So when you say which is more important, I guess I could argue that they both are for different reasons. Min-max is great because you can really dial in what you want to control. And again, I have a company in town, they've got 5 locations. They live and die off of min-max, but it gives them a whole lot of control about what they're purchasing, a lot of control. The vendor item, vendor case pack, I'm going to go into here and pull up this item. This is for Pinnacle. This is a little weird. You have to go all the way into the vendor item. You got to find your vendor. You got to go to the purchasing tab. You really have to kind of dig to find this, but this is where your purchasing unit gets created. So maybe this one actually gets sold in dozens, but I might say maybe they only sell them to you in cases of 12, right? That's very common, right? A vendor might, you sell it as a each, but you do this. These are those case packs or vendor units, right? So if you take the time to set these up, then when you do your purchase advice, you can say, hey, round up or whatever, do my purchasing in my purchasing unit. And you can even specify these minimums, right? So maybe this particular vendor, even though you purchase in cases, they might say, yeah, but we never sell less than 4 cases at a time or whatever. So you can set up these vendor multiples. And again, in purchase advice, that was a choice. You don't have to use those, but it's something you can turn on to use. And Peggy, if that's not entirely clear, I'm more than happy to talk to you after the call, because I know where you live. Just kidding. I know where you work. I want to do our example one more time. I'm going to clear my purchase requests so that we can see that a little clearer. I really thought these were cleared out, so I'm sorry for that example. Let me clear these up real quick here. We're going to say delete. It's a better example when you see it happen. Okay, so without all the talking, here's how purchase advice goes. Prove to you that it's a time saver. Purchase, this is you Tuesday morning with your cup of coffee. You come in, you say I want to do days of supply. You're going to pick some date range. In my case, I'm going to do a month this month. And I do want to get ahead of the game. I'm going to order for 30. I don't have to filter for vendor, but today I'm just so this all kind of runs kind of peppy. And that's all my choices. That's all I had to pick, right? My report, my date range, and I'm going to say preview because I always like to know what I'm going to get. And I'm getting a few hits here. I might say, hey, that looks great. Love it. Let's go generate. And we'll say, okay. And you can see here, I created 3 lines. I generated 1 purchase request. And that's the power of this. So now when I go to purchase request, instead of me sitting there, imagine me sitting there having to think through what are all the, things I want to order this week. Boom, this got generated. I'm still going to edit this, right? I'm still going to make my own choices. And I probably add on to this while I'm at it. But hopefully, most people, when I train on this and they see this, they oftentimes, that's where I get the reaction of, oh, okay, I get it. That's pretty cool, right? That I can see how that would save me some time, right? Even if maybe this comes up with 50 lines and I go through and 10 of them I say nope, 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 delete, delete, delete. A lot easier to delete than it is to go searching around and trying to decide what you want to order. All right, that brings us to 11:50. I wanted to be sure to leave a few minutes here at the end for questions. Now's your chance. I've done my blah blah blah. Now it's your turn.